So what I would do, what I thought I would do first is just kind of give a little bit of background as to how Arena sees things at the moment, and I guess outline a little bit Arena's role. Arena has got two of our four priorities that are kind of relevant for the discussion here. One being secure and reliable energy at ideally least cost. And then the second being energy productivity. Now, we haven't talked an awful lot about energy productivity, but kind of energy productivity and demand response, I think, are in some way interchangeable. So, Arena, we've got about $550 million still to commit, which we expect to commit over the next 2.5 years. Arena's role really is to assist the transition, transition of the energy system. Within that role, clearly $550 million is not enough to actually facilitate the transition itself. So we see our role really being as very much enablers in that, and supporting essentially experiments or new ways of doing things in facilitating that transition. So if you like, we build the building blocks that we can try out, that you in this room can try out in your businesses, be it new technology, be it new ways of doing things, be it bringing existing technologies to commerciality. Some of those experiments will fail. Hopefully, most of them work, but that's kind of our role, to help you to help build those building blocks. So where do we see things at the moment? Well, the new energy system is really starting to take shape. We've got a forming idea of where the new generation is going to come from, and I think it's fair to say that that's principally going to be wind and solar, and together with balancing, and this is at the large scale end, the balancing coming from pumped hydro, battery, and other forms of storage. I think we're close to forming a view kind of across the industry and kind of what the cost ceiling is, which I think is a very interesting place to start from. So if you think about it, wind kind of 50 to 55 dollars a megawatt hour, solar sort of 65 to 70. This is at the moment, and the firming probably 20 to 30. So a bit of a range there, and it depends what you're using the storage for. Be it long-term balancing or shorter-term balancing, the longer term being pumped hydro and likely cheaper. The batteries doing different things, being shorter term and perhaps just a little bit more expensive in terms of dollars per megawatt hour, but nevertheless very important in terms of the balancing. So that takes you to kind of, I don't know, $70, $80 foreseeable per megawatt hour for firm generation, which kind of looks okay compared to current prices. Obviously, we'd all like it to be lower, but as a starting point, it's not too bad. Stick in some biomass, some CST, bit of inertia, frequency control, and that looks like a good starting point. So with technology, innovation, and efficiency to drive the costs further, is kind of quite a good starting point. Now, there are a number of things, obviously, that we still don't know about that, and pretty big things. We don't know how much, we don't know when, and there's still a bit of work to be done in the where. So where are we going to put it around the grid, and how are we going to make all of that work? And then together with that, we've got the generation that's coming in at the household level. So we're starting to see, obviously, all the PV in the roofs, as you'd be aware, plus the batteries. So what is less clear then, from Arena's perspective, is how all this gets integrated at the consumer level. So again, just I think kind of useful to have a little bit of wander through history. So historically, consumers, both at the C&I and retail level, have been at the end of this, I guess, generation, transmission, distribution line, where they've where they've kind of taken that relatively cheap and reliable power for granted. Now, again, useful to reflect, why has this happened? Well, it's really largely been done by government-sponsored generation and transmission, whether that's through regulation or if you look back historically, really most of the assets that we currently have in the system were actually built by governments. So, and the consumers never really then had to think that much about where the power came from or really how much you used within limits. You know, everybody yelled at the kids, turn the lights off, but you know, it wasn't really much more than that. And the cost, so what that's led to then is that the cost of this system that we have has really hit home in the last few years, and the realization that there is an alternative to ever increasing production. We can actually moderate consumption. Because the electricity system build to date is sized for the times of peak usage, or actually it may even be the time of peak usage, nobody's really thought about moderating behavior, or but when you now look at it, you can see that it doesn't take much by way of moderation for it to have a really big effect. And this is what we've seen in the trial that was run with IEMO. So it would be nice to reduce demand in an absolute sense, but even shifting demand for short periods of time can have a really big effect. So there are benefits to be had at the consumer level, and our view at ARENA is there's actually an awful lot of work, and where the majority of the new work is going to take place is around the networks and the customers. So there's a lot of hardware issues, which is kind of the big issue, I guess, at the large scale generation transmission part of the grid. There's also an awful lot of software, though, to take place at the consumer network end, and as well as significant, we would expect, regulatory change and consumer behavior issues. So in our discussions with IEMO, and ARENA and IEMO work very closely together. We've in fact got an MOU to develop proof of concept projects. We started to think about how do we help facilitate this change through a demand response round. We jointly ran one of ARENA's A-Lab sessions, where we get everybody in the room and get a lot of ideas, brainstorming going on, which was very successful back in last May. Designed a program, competitive program, where the outcomes that we're looking for is first of all to determine whether demand response was an effective source of reserve capacity, an evidence base to form the design of a new market, because this does need a new market. It's not one that exists at the moment in any significant way. Inform price discovery, so how much is this going to cost, and improve the commercial and technical readiness of participants to provide demand response. The program went very well. We were very happy with how it went. We got, in very short order, so this was done in compressed time frame, we got over 20 responses. We ended up funding 10 of those together with the New South Wales Government. So ARENA put in about $30 million, New South Wales Government $7.5 million, and that secured about 200 megawatts of demand response capacity from 10 participants. Real range of participants, which was great. We got everybody enabled. The program commenced on the 1st of December. It's delivered about 140 megawatts of capacity in the current summer. It steps up to 200 over the next 3 years. Done at a cost of 67,000 per megawatt per year for 3 years. So it's 3 years of demand response that we've secured. You compare that to the cost of adding a gas peaker into the system, and it's an awful lot cheaper. So we're absolutely delighted with the way that that's gone. We're also around demand response, and again, it's how do you build the evidence and the building blocks in the system. There's a couple of virtual power plant projects that are partway through construction at the moment. I think it's fair to say not without their challenges in terms of how do they work, how do they orchestrate, particularly the batteries, how do they draw the power down into the networks, what do the networks actually say when there's a huge influx of power washing back into the system of people's roofs. So and you know, the network company's very risk averse, so it's getting them comfortable with this new way of working that's going to be very important. We've also got a program running with, or an investment running with solar analytics. I see Renata in the room, and that actually allows people to measure the power that's coming from their PV at any given time, and kind of see how that interacts with consumption. So you can actually see how your consumption, when you put the dishwasher on, when you put the coffee machine on, that kind of mirrors in or matches in to the generation that's coming off your roof. I will be 2 seconds and finished. One final project to mention, another company called Pooled Energy, and their hypothesis is that there is, and this is an amazing number, there is 2.5 gigawatts of power consumption in our pool pumps. 2.5 gigawatts. Now, your pool doesn't actually really care whether the power is used in the middle of the day, whether it's used in the evening, whenever it's used. So there's actually 2.5 gigawatts of shiftable load available in the system, which is something that's very easy to very easy to capture. So I'll maybe leave it there with 2 bells, which I think was more than anybody else got, and pass back to Cassandra. Thanks very much.